The freezing sludge crests the frayed top of your canvas puttees. It spills into your heavy leather boots with a sickening, icy squelch. You are standing in 2 feet of liquid brown filth. The smell hits the back of your throat, a suffocating thick vapor of cordite, metallic blood, rat urine, and the liquefied bowels of the men who held this exact position yesterday. You wiggle your toes inside the wet wool. Nothing happens. The biological connection is severed. They are gone, replaced by 2 heavy, numb blocks of frozen marble, permanently attached to your ankles. Every time the artillery fires in the distance, the ground vibrates, sending a dull, sickening ache up your shin bones. You shift your weight, and you feel the water inside your boot slosh against your bare skin. But it doesn't feel like water anymore. It feels like a thick, gelatinous paste. Your own skin is shedding, dissolving into the mud inside your footwear. You are entirely conscious, holding a Lee Enfield rifle with shaking hands, staring across a bleak, cratered expanse of barbed wire in the Ypres salient. The temperature is hovering just above freezing. You have not taken your boots off in 18 days. You are experiencing the absolute limit of mammalian endurance in an environment actively designed to erase human life. But as you look down at the brown water pooling around your shins, you realize a terrifying mechanical truth about this war. The bullets whizzing over your helmet are fast, loud, and merciful. The true horror of the Western Front is completely silent. It is entirely invisible, and it is currently eating you alive from the ground up. If the goal of an industrial war is mass extermination, why is the mud being so incredibly slow, so surgically precise about unmaking your anatomy? What happens when a human being is reduced to a rotting component in a machine that refuses to stop grinding? Welcome to the year 1916. You are merely a biological cog in the greatest, most efficient meat grinder ever constructed by human hands. The generals miles behind the line sit in dry chateaus, looking at paper maps and seeing strategic terrain. You look down into the trench and see a watery, freezing grave. You stand in this narrow ditch for days. You cannot sit in the mud. You cannot sleep without drowning. You simply stand upright in the freezing water. Your circulatory system is executing a ruthless, calculated triage. The core of your body must survive at all costs. The heart and lungs must keep pumping warm blood to the brain. To maintain that vital core heat, your autonomic nervous system orders the blood vessels in your legs to violently constrict. The arteries clamp shut. The blood flow to your feet slows to a miserable, freezing trickle. Your body is deliberately starving your own extremities of oxygen, white blood cells, and nutrients. This is severe vasoconstriction. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism designed for a temporary blizzard, not a 4-year war. But this defense mechanism is a lethal trap. The freezing water in the trench isn't the actual executioner. Your own autonomic nervous system is setting the stage for a localized biological apocalypse. You think the numbness in your toes is a blessing. It stops the brutal, sharp aching of the cold. It allows you to stand your watch, grip your rifle, and ignore the physical reality of the mud. You are entirely wrong. The numbness is the silence of the graveyard. Inside your tightly laced boots, the skin of your feet is severely waterlogged. It becomes rapidly macerated. It wrinkles, swells, and turns a ghastly, translucent corpse white. The cellular walls of your epidermis begin to physically break down and separate. The protective barrier between your internal bloodstream and the toxic, FECEs-filled trench water is dissolving layer by layer. You pray the numbness lasts forever, because the moment the blood attempts to return to those starved tissues, it will ignite a biological fire you cannot possibly extinguish. The industrial machine surrounding you does not care about your cellular breakdown. The artillery keeps firing. The whistle blows. You are expected to climb out of this hole and run across no man's land on feet that no longer structurally exist. A relief unit finally arrives in the dead of night. You stagger blindly back through the communication trenches to the rear support lines. You collapse onto a splintered wooden ammunition crate. Your hands shake violently as you reach for the stiff, mud-caked laces of your boots. The leather is frozen solid, locked around your ankle like an iron shackle. You pull the heavy boot off with a desperate, frantic heave. You expect to see your foot, perhaps pale and wrinkled. You don't realize that the tight leather boot wasn't just keeping the water out. It was the only structural casing holding your rotting flesh together. As the boot violently slides away, the smell hits the freezing air of the dugout. It is the unmistakable, gag-inducing stench of decomposing meat, old cheese, and stagnant swamp water. The entire layer of skin on the sole of your foot peels away in one solid, horrific piece, sticking firmly to the damp wool of your trench sock. You are looking down at raw, exposed subcutaneous fat and the swollen, blue, branching lines of your own dying veins. Your foot instantly swells to twice its normal anatomical size. Massive, fluid-filled bullet blisters the size of plums erupt rapidly across your instep and heel. They are filled with a dark, foul-smelling, hemorrhagic serum. The microscopic capillaries inside your foot have completely burst under the pressure of the returning blood flow. The blood pools heavily in the dead tissue, turning the skin from a bruised, sickly purple to a necrotic pitch black. This is trench foot. You foolishly try to touch it. The protective numbness is gone now. The aggressive return of blood flow to the damaged nerves, a process called hyperemia, ignites a blinding, agonizing, burning sensation. It feels exactly as if someone is holding an industrial blowtorch directly to your raw, exposed nerve endings. You scream, a ragged, tearing sound. The noise joins a massive chorus of hundreds of other young men screaming in the mud of the casualty clearing stations. The black, swollen tissue is completely dead. But you think the dead, black flesh is the end of the story. You believe the worst is over. It is merely the fertile soil for a much more aggressive, invisible invader waiting in the mud. The open, weeping sores on your sole are a wide-open gate for the millions of bacteria swimming in the trench water. Clostridium perfringens enters the dead tissue. This specific bacteria thrives in the absolute absence of oxygen. It begins to rapidly digest your foot from the inside out, producing a highly toxic gas that bubbles directly under the remaining layers of your skin. This is gas gangrene. You accidentally press a trembling finger against the black, shiny skin of your big toe, and you hear a distinct, horrific crackling sound. Crepitus. It sounds exactly like dry leaves crushing or bubble wrap popping deep beneath the flesh. Your foot is literally rotting and fermenting while it is still firmly attached to your leg. You beg the exhausted stretcher bearers to take you away. You beg for the medical tent. You believe the field hospital is a sanctuary where the pain finally stops. You are blindly walking into an industrial slaughterhouse operating at a speed that completely defies modern medical ethics. You are thrown roughly onto a blood-stained canvas stretcher. The casualty clearing station is a massive, chaotic, freezing tent smelling overwhelmingly of sweet chloroform, sharp bleach, and mass human hemorrhage. There are no clean white sheets here. There is no sterile environment. There is only a heavy wooden table soaked black with the fluids of 1,000 casualties. The surgeon is wearing a heavy canvas apron that is stiff, almost armored, with the dried, crusted blood of 50 men who came before you this morning. He is smoking a cheap cigarette. He looks at your black, bubbling, oversized foot for exactly 2 seconds. There is no medical consultation. There is no desperate attempt to save the toes or salvage the heel. In the industrial grinder of 1916, speed is the only acceptable metric. He reaches for a heavy iron bone saw. This is the ultimate head fake. You think the violent amputation is the cure. You think losing the foot will stop the aggressive rot from reaching your heart and killing you. The surgical orderly slaps a filthy rag soaked in ether violently over your nose and mouth. You choke on the sweet, burning chemical fumes, but you do not go entirely under. You are trapped in a twilight state of paralysis and absolute terror. You feel the heavy, jagged steel teeth of the saw bite aggressively into your tibia, just a few inches below the knee joint. You feel the horrific vibration rattling up your femur and violently shaking your skull. You think the iron saw will sever the pain, but the unsterilized, blood-caked blade is actively pushing the lethal gangrene bacteria directly into the exposed, highly vascular marrow of your remaining leg bone. The surgeon violently severs the leg, tosses the heavy, rotting mass into a galvanized metal bucket overflowing with other anonymous, black limbs, and quickly sears the bleeding stump. He slaps a rough dressing of cheap gauze and burning iodine over the raw meat and exposed bone. You are roughly moved to a canvas cot in the corner of the tent. You survived the brutal surgery. The rotting foot is gone. You breathe a shallow, ragged sigh of relief into the freezing air. But surviving the surgeon's rusty saw is just the prologue to the real executioner hiding quietly in the damp canvas of your recovery tent. The year is 1916. Alexander Fleming will not discover penicillin for another 12 agonizing years. The very concept of an antibiotic is pure science fiction to the men bleeding in this mud. The dressing on your stump is changed hours later by an exhausted, shell-shocked nurse using water that has not been properly boiled. The Staphylococcus bacteria from the overcrowded, filthy, feces-laden tent finds the raw, weeping, surgical wound of your amputation. The infection easily bypasses the local tissue and enters your central bloodstream directly. This is septicemia. Your heart rate skyrockets to a lethal rhythm. Your internal temperature spikes to a delirious brain-cooking 105 degrees. Your internal organs begin to systematically shut down one by one under the toxic load. The kidneys fail, filling your blood with urea. The liver stops filtering. Your severed foot is rotting in a bucket in France, but the microscopic mud of the trench has successfully conquered your entire circulatory system. You die a week later in a freezing hospital bed, your veins pumping thick, toxic sludge, killed by the exact medical intervention you begged for. The British Army alone treated over 74,000 recorded cases of trench foot during the freezing winters of the First World War. It was a massive epidemic of rotting flesh, caused entirely by the stagnant, mechanized environment of modern industrialized warfare. The generals eventually mandated dry socks and strict whale oil rubs, treating the soldiers' fragile feet exactly like moving metallic parts on an artillery piece that needed constant lubrication to prevent structural rusting. Today, we think of rotting, gangrenous limbs as a dark relic of the black and white, grainy past. We have advanced Gore-Tex boots. We have heated, waterproof insoles. We have heavy, broad-spectrum intravenous antibiotics that kill bacterial infections before they even start bubbling beneath the skin. We feel incredibly invincible against the damp earth. But biological evolution is terrifyingly patient. The microscopic bacteria that ate the feet of an entire generation are still waiting quietly in the soil. They are multiplying in the warm floodwaters of every modern hurricane. They are thriving in the freezing, trash-filled slush of city streets where the homeless huddle in wet, ruined shoes. More terrifyingly, we are actively engineering bacteria that easily resist our strongest modern antibiotics, breeding a new generation of apex pathogens that look at our sterile medicine and simply adapt. We are actively creating the perfect microscopic conditions for the industrial grinder to return to our hospital wards. The next time your feet get soaked in a cold, heavy winter rain, and you feel that sharp, stinging, numb sensation creeping into your toes as you wait for the bus, look down at the pavement. Feel the damp, freezing sock pressing tightly against your skin. Imagine you cannot take that heavy shoe off for another 30 days. If you had to choose between letting your foot slowly rot off in the freezing mud or letting an exhausted butcher saw it off with a dirty, infected blade while you were wide awake, which agonizing survival path would you take? Make your choice in the comments. The Archivista is logging your answers. The water is still rising in the trench, and the saw is always sharp.